So, Johnny Mnemonic from 1995. It's sort of a cyberpunk film, and you can see why they got Keanu Reeves for Cyberpunk 77 or 2077. Not only, obviously, The Matrix, but this is cyberpunk as well, and this was before The Matrix, so I thought that was interesting. When I watched it at first, I was like, "Oh, did the people who make this see The Matrix and cast him, or was it vice versa?" And it was vice versa. What a ghetto stream, LMAO. Well, we're having fun. We're keeping it real. If you don't like it, you don't have to be here. But I appreciate anyone giving it a go. But let's keep talking about the movie. But so Johnny Mnemonic, starring Keanu Reeves. Let's look at. I like the pumped up Barbara in the background. Yeah, we got our that's Heather. If you're talking about this beautiful lady here, and we got Stacy. What a silly movie. This movie is pretty silly. Let's get into it. Let's look at the Rotten Tomatoes. So let's give the basic premise. So it's the future, the year 2021. Obviously, it's not the future anymore, but it was the future in 1995. And the basic premise is that Keanu Reeves has his brain wet-wired so he can curry, so he's a courier of data. He downloads data into his brain and then delivers it around or whatever. And the basic premise is that he has this secret data that people are trying to get, and it's in his brain, and people are trying to cut off his head and get the data. He's a walking USB drive, LOL. Yeah, essentially, it's exactly what it is. Let's look. Okay, so people didn't like this movie. It has very low rating on Rotten Tomatoes. 18%. Ouch, ouch, ouch. It is 18% on. That's for critic score, and 31 only for audience. That's pretty weak. I must say, ouch, ouch, ouch.
I'm the leprechaun! Stop it, alright?
And let's read the critics' consensus. As narratively misguided as it is woefully miscast, Johnny Mnemonic brings the 90s cyberpunk thriller to inane new woes, or lows. That's a weird sort of worded critics' consensus, but I think I kind of get what they mean by that, but I don't know if the narrative is misguided. I think, to me, basically, and I could be just oversimplifying this, it basically means what this movie stands for, in my opinion, is don't let technology control your life, and that's sort of what. Or else your life might get shitty if you're so wrapped up in the internet and stuff. And this was in 1995. And that's what I sort of feel, because all his problems come from the fucking being hooked up to this, being, like Stevie put it, being a human USB drive, being so connected with the technology. So I don't agree with that part of the critics' consensus, but this movie isn't amazing, but I enjoyed it partially because I just love this genre. I love sci-fi 90s shit, and this is exactly that. And the effects are fun, and things explode, and there's cheesy dialogue, and there's lots of elements you could argue aren't good, but this is the kind of movie that I love, and I had fun with it. Great visuals. Yeah, I would agree with that. Especially for the time too. It's very good. I would definitely agree. But let's drink some more beer. Boo-doo-doo-doo. Oh, so back to the Rotten Tomatoes. Let's read some of the reviews. Johnny Mnemonic is no The Matrix. Yeah, that's true. Its world building lacks specifically nuanced grit, but the ideas Gibson thrust forward furthered the cyberpunk conversation on screen for years to come. So yeah, I guess I kind of get what they mean by that. Obviously it's not as good as The Matrix. The Matrix is one of the best sci-fi films ever, you could argue. Anyway, I don't think it's that good, but it is good. It's definitely better than this. and it added to the cyberpunk genre, but yeah, you can tell that they just didn't like it generally, and that there's lots of elements you can pull this movie apart for, so I get that to a certain extent, but I liked it still. It poignantly juxtaposes its futurism with a yearning for the past in the form of Johnny's abandoned memories. As for Reeves, he always best when he is calm and frowningly subdued. I don't agree with that. I think some of his better acting is when he's getting angry. I think it's funnier too, but and I've said this before. I don't, I'm not going to say it yet because it's in the notes, so we'll talk about that when we get there. Moving on. Johnny Mnemonic is both terrible and brilliant in equal measure. I like that review. That's kind of funny. And I get what he means, because there's lots of, like, good elements of it, but there is a lot of stupid things that, like, don't make sense, and that are just stupid. But for the most part, it looks really cool, and it's super fun, so I sort of just, I let a lot of these things go, but, I mean, I made notes, and we'll talk about some of the problems, but overall, this movie's really fun. As a whole piece, the movie just clicks. It's sprawling and silly and has no right to work at all. But somehow it just does. Yeah, I agree with that because I liked it. It is super wacky, but for people who like this genre, I think you would enjoy this. Like the sci-fi, cyberpunk, whatever sort of genre. It's fun. That's enough of the RT page, I'd say. Let's look at the IMDb page. 5.6 out of 10 on IMDb. We got 5.6. That's pretty whatever. This people seem to not really like this. Like, that's an okay rating on IMDb, I guess. It's not great. Over 5 at least, but still not great. The Dr. Jones reveal. Oh yeah, we'll get into that. I like Keanu more in Johnny than in Dracula. Yeah, I probably do too. I think it works a little better here than in that. I think he works better in Sci-Fi. Him in like a period piece doesn't work for me. I don't think. It just doesn't talk like they would talk then. That's how I feel anyway. Let's look. Keanu Reeves, Johnny Mnemonic, yes, of course. There's quite a few notable actors in this. So Dolph Lundgren, known by many, he's in Rocky IV. He's in. There's a ton of movies he's in actually, but he's in this as the street preacher. He's the evil street preacher, who's hired to kill Keanu Reeves and take his head, with the data in it. Ice-T is in it. Oh yeah, Dolph Lundgren's also in the live-action He-Man movie. But Ice-T plays a character called J-Bone, and he's like the lead of the underground resistance called the Low-Techs. Get it? Low-tech, low technology. They're against the technology. Anyways, even though they use a bunch of fucking technology, they're not really low-tech. But I digress. I think that was the point of the name, though, that they're probably lower tech than the bad guys that have all this shit. But yeah, Ice-T plays J-Bone. Henry Rollins. Oh yeah, he's Spider. That's cool. I didn't even realize that. But that is everyone I recognize. Okay. Moving down to see the box office information. Oof, this movie was a bomb. Budget, $26 million. Gross worldwide, $19 million. Oof, oof, oof. It did not make its money back at all. But, I was going to say, but it's a cult classic, but it's not really. It's according to the internet, people don't really like it that much. But someone recommended it to me, and I'm glad I watched it. There's parts of it that I really liked. This is the kind of movie I have a sort of soft spot for. You could argue that it's sort of like a B-movie plot, 90s science fiction, action and gore, my kind of thing, Anyways, That's the IMDb page. So let's get in to my notes. I have a few right here. Ooh. Dolph is not Dr. Jones. Dolph is the preacher. He is like a reverend or whatever that's hired to kill Keanu Reeves. He's like a hitman that's also a preacher. And I thought that was kind of cool, actually. It's something that I don't think I've seen in anything else. There might be in other stuff that, like, there's a preacher that's a hitman, but this is the first thing that I can think of it from, anyway. Original enough to me. Anyways, let's look at the notes here. So my first note is the Info Wars is something that happened in the history of this universe, and I immediately thought, I was like, is this where Alex Jones got the name for his show, Info Wars? I wondered that. I don't know if that's true, but it could be. He might have seen this movie and be like, that's a cool name, the Info Wars. Hackers, same year, is better than Johnny, and Super. I've seen Hackers, Matthew Lillard, and I remember it kind of. I remember it more than, and we rented it like from the library years ago. I remember watching it. I remember like the crazy game and the way that they do the hacking. It's very 90s. I remember liking it though as a kid. Is Alex Jones Dr. Jones? Sure. So let's say yes. I like Keanu, but he's not the greatest actor. So I said we would get into this. Let's get into this. He's just not. I love him, and he seems like the nicest guy ever. So I have nothing against him. I'm just being honest with the way I feel about his acting ability. And I'm not saying he's the worst actor ever, because he's not. And obviously he's in great movies, and he works in these movies. So he's passable. It's just some of the deliveries, a little wooden at times. It could be better. I love him. He's no Alex Winter. Yeah, they're different people. Yeah, Keanu Reeves, he's good in action roles when he doesn't say much. I think that's why he has like 9 lines in the newest John Wick movie. I haven't seen it, but I've heard that he has little to no dialogue in it. So I think that people know his strengths are with the way he does his actions and stuff. Dialogue is not his greatest strength. I think that he's gotten better at acting now, but in the 90s, which is when this movie is, not so great. Just wooden at times. It works, but I have to say it. He's just not the best actor. He's good enough to party, but he's not the best actor. And I like him. He seems really cool, you know? Please don't hurt me, Keanu Reeves. Dracula was a mistake. Yeah, we can agree on that. For sure. I think that was a miscast. And people are saying this was miscast, but I don't think it was that bad. I think it works. I think he works as the main guy in this. My next note is, why isn't he honest about the upload capacity? So he gets this secret data that he puts in his brain, and it's way more than his brain can handle. And then, like, how does he not just die right there? I don't understand. I guess it's like the technology isn't real, so you could say, oh, maybe you just jam it in there, it's fine. But like, if you were to do that to a real hard drive, the hard drive it wouldn't allow it, you know? But yeah, I digress. The point is that I think he should have been honest about the capacity, but I guess because like he could have died, you know? But it's a movie, so you know, you kind of let that slide. Just enjoy the ride. But I think he should have been said something, but I get why he did. They got to continue the plot, but they could have just made it like close. They have it like 200 gigabytes above what his head can handle, and it's like he would be fucked up probably, you know? He should have been honest when they told him how many gigs the files are. He should have been like, oh yeah, I can only handle this much, but then he's bleeding out his nose and he's getting the headaches and he's all fucked up. Anyway, moving on. I like how they show the internet. So this is 1995. This reminds me of a movie called Lawnmower Man with Pierce Brosnan, where it's about making a dullard or someone not so smart, making them smarter with VR. And the VR scenes really reminds me of this movie, because it's very similar time in the 90s, and it's very new, early CGI. But it looks good. He's perfect for a guy missing part of his brain. Yeah, it works for Keanu, you say? I get that. But yeah, I like how they show the internet. It's pretty cool. It's cheesy, but I think it works for this movie and the time period for sure. And it's kind of cool how they show him like moving around things, and some of it's similar, like the visor. Like those are kind of like VR headsets today. So they sort of predicted some of this in some ways. You could argue. It's obviously not exactly the same, but the way that like they go through the internet, and the internet's like sort of a place or a city that you go through or something. It's kind of interesting. I like it. The random cuts of anime is a bit weird. So one of the fight scenes near the beginning, they just like keep cutting to this weird anime scene. I'm just like, why? I just want to. I just want to see the actual fight, but artistic choice, I guess. It's fine, but I thought it was a little weird. Okay, this was a line that I just thought was really funny, and yes, Keanu Reeves is not the best actor in the world, but sometimes that makes the line delivery so funny for these stupid lines, and makes it that more entertaining. And this was one of them. He says, "Next time, knock, Baldy." When he fucks up this evil bald guy, it just made me laugh really hard. We called it Jap animation. That's what anime wasn't a mainstream thing yet. Wasn't tired yet. Okay, fair enough. Well, that's what I know it as, so I think it's close enough. Boo! Ice-T is in this movie. We already said that, but he's in it. He's in this movie. Next note. Cool effects. We've already said this, but this movie looks really cool. There's like scenes where like this laser whip is slicing through people, and there's lots of cool practical effects mixed with some early CGI, and I don't know. It's a good little mix of that. And you probably didn't see that as much in the 90s, but it was cool to see both of them, and I like that. Anyways, cool effects. Yeah, I like the way this movie looks. They sort of mention iPhones. So they say iPhones in this, but they don't mean iPhones. They mean iPhone spelled like like an eyeball phone. EYE phones. So I just thought that was kind of funny. That's all I have it in there for. Just kind of like, hey, they almost sort of kind of predicted iPhones, but not really at all. They sort of said the name anyway, without knowing it. I think it's just a coincidence, though. Not think, it is, but still. Why doesn't she mention that Spider can help Johnny sooner? So there's a big portion of the movie where Johnny's trying to get all this shit out of his brain, and this woman that helped save him is trying to help him do that. So you think she would have thought of this earlier. This guy Spider she knows that knows how to take shit out of people's brains, or seems like he would know. She doesn't tell him about him until way later in the movie. It's like, why didn't you tell him sooner, before he did all this other shit? We could have went straight to Spider, and Spider was helpful, so. But they didn't do it. They did the other shit before. It's like, maybe she didn't think of it. You can make that argument. She didn't think of it until then, maybe, but I don't know. You think she's trying to get her money, so you think she would have thought of anything she can to try to help this guy so she can get her money. So that doesn't make sense to me. But moving on. Dolph Lundgren, he's in this movie. We've already said that, but he's awesome. He's good as the preacher. I always liked Dolph Lundgren. And as they say in the show It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, who is the greatest, or who is the most underrated actor of all time? Dolph Lundgren. That's what they say. I don't know if I agree with that, but honestly, he is underrated. Like, I do agree that he is fucking good. Especially now. Like, maybe in some of his younger roles, but he's gotten better, for sure, at acting. Anyway. How does Spider know that Johnny is carrying the cure for NAS. NAS is this disease in this universe that makes you shake uncontrollably and fucks you up. iPhone. But Spider. So we find out that that's, spoiler alert, I guess, that's what is in this. Is inside of Johnny. The data that everyone's trying to get is this cure for this disease. And Spider, this is why I don't know how Spider knows that it's the disease in there. Because the whole time they're trying to figure out what's in his brain. They don't know. And they're like, oh, did you crack the code? Did you get in? Did you find out? And he's like, no, I didn't. And then he's like, oh, but I know what's in there, though. It's like, how do you know what's in there without cracking the code? That doesn't make any sense to me. It just doesn't make... I know this is a movie again, but it doesn't make computer sense. Because he said that he didn't know what was in there. And then right after that, he's like, actually, we do know. It's like, what the fuck? Moving on. Johnny being a little bitch. So yeah, that's all my note. There's just a scene where he's like whining. Being a little cranky puss. That's all. He's just being a little bitch. Johnny Mnemonic, also known as Keanu Reeves in this movie, but his character's Johnny, so we'll say Johnny. They just assume that Spider is dead. So yeah, he clearly does die, so they were right to assume that. They leave Spider to fight with Dolph Lundgren so that she and Keanu Reeves can escape, but while they're fighting, they get out of there, of course, but then later... Ice-T is like, oh, is he okay? Where's Spider? And they're like, Spider's dead. But they didn't see Spider die. So, yeah, I guess they could assume it, and they did, obviously. But there was a chance that he survived, even though I think he did die. But still, they could have been like, well, we don't know, but he's probably dead. They could have said something like that, and it would have made sense. Because they didn't see him die. So that didn't make sense to me. Moving on. So yeah, to your point, Steve, you wanted me to talk about this. I'll talk about it. So, a big plot point in the movie is that Keanu Reeves is trying to get to this doctor, Dr. Jones. Apparently, Dr. Jones is one of the few people that can help with getting the data out of Johnny Mnemonic's brain. So they go to Ice-T, and Ice-T is like, okay, we'll show you Dr. Jones. And it turns out that Dr. Jones is a dolphin. And it's sort of a running joke, but it made me angry. I didn't laugh at it. Keanu Reeves keeps calling the dolphin a fish. This is clearly a very powerful dolphin. And the dolphin doesn't like being called a fish. It's been established that. He uses the sonar to fuck everybody up. And he's like, he's a fish. And he keeps saying it. It's like, dude, calm down. Quit calling him a fish. This fucking dolphin's gonna fuck you up. And he's like, yeah, it's a fish. You fucking fish. He's like, it's been established. He's a mammal. Quit calling him a fish. He's trying to help you. Quit being so mean to Dr. Jones, the fucking dolphin. That's how I feel about it. Because Dr. Jones, duh. Exactly. You get it, Stevie. Alright, but yeah, moving on. Who is this person who's mad about the car exploding on her friend? Okay, yeah, so this is part that I guess it makes enough sense, and we may have seen these characters, but I didn't really recognize them. But there's a part where all these government officials or Yakuza members or whatever are trying to raid this low-tech base, and they're blowing it up with a rocket launcher. And at one point, the low-tech people they drop a car and crush a guy, and then this woman that I feel like we're supposed to know her, but she's like, I don't recognize her, and she's like, you killed Johnny, or not Johnny, but some guy. You killed Benjamin or whatever, and she's mad that he's dead. But who are these people? Do we know them? I don't remember these characters. They're acting like we know them. And maybe we're not supposed to, but it still felt like a weird choice, and I was just kind of confused. I don't know these guys. Why are they acting like we know them? But anyway, moving on. Why does the laser whip automatically kill the bad guy and not cut the rope ladder? So yeah, this part didn't make sense to me physics-wise, but I understand that this is something that doesn't exist. This is a piece of technology that's not real. This laser whip thing. So Johnny goes to grab the laser whip. Him and one of the bad guys are hanging from this rope ladder above this lava where they're about to fall or whatever. So Johnny quickly grabs the laser whip off of the finger of this guy, and then it immediately just chops, like so conveniently, just chops the bad guy up, chops him up and puts him down, and he falls to his death. But it doesn't cut the rope ladder at all. It doesn't cut Keanu Reeves at all. It didn't make any sense, especially the way it moves. It's like, how did it not cut anybody else? This wacky laser whip. And again, I realize it's not a real thing, but still. The physics didn't make sense to me, even though it's not real. Moving on. Why? Or they got hit multiple times with a rocket launcher, but everything's just sort of fine. Yeah. So the low-tech headquarters with all this equipment and stuff, it gets hit by a rocket launcher multiple times, but they're still fucking, like, just fine. Like, they can operate, and everyone just seems fine. I don't get how that it's just fine. Like, they shot, like, 4 rockets at this thing, and everything's just fine after. It didn't seem realistic to me. But anyway, like, all the equipment's operational. No way it would be with all those rockets getting launched up in there. And my last note is, how can they do the download at all if they're out of power? So, yeah, this is one thing that didn't make sense. So I guess this is sort of them explaining that, oh yeah, we have been fucked up from these rocket launches or whatever. But the way they do it is they say that they're out of power, so they can't. So do it now. We're out of power, so do the download right now. But if you're out of power, how can they do it without the power? You need power to operate the machinery. But if you're out of power, which is what Ice-T says, then it wouldn't work. So the phrasing just didn't make sense. Maybe that's not what he meant, or not what the script meant, but that's what it said, so it didn't make sense. So yeah, I don't get how they can download at all if they're out of power, because he said they're out of power, and it doesn't make sense. Okay, that's it. That's the end of that movie review. Thanks for hanging, folks. This movie is not amazing. It's not going to win any great prizes, but if you like this genre of sort of campy 90s sci-fi with Keanu Reeves, if that gets you going at all, check it out on Amazon Prime. It's in Canada. I like this movie. It's not amazing, but I kind of enjoyed it. I think it's better than the internet's giving it credit for, and I am a little bit of a softie for this genre, so I'm going to give it 7. Just a straight 7. Because I really do think it's not amazing, but it's harmless and it's kind of fun, and I think that people are giving it a hard time on the internet because it's not The Matrix. Maybe it's not as good as The Matrix, but it's good. Johnny Mnemonic, 7 out of 10 dogs, 7.3 Stevies. Backwards. Boom.